nice shot there. Well, hey, everybody, welcome. We were struck to hear a comment from the U.S. Attorney from the Middle District of Florida. Robert O'Neill recently said that fraud is epidemic in Florida. He's referring to white-collar crimes relating to health care and financial issues. Probably not surprised about Mr. O'Neill's statement. LT Lafferty, he's practice leader for white-collar crime at government investigations and corporate compliance and ethics at Fowler White Boggs. LT is also a former federal prosecutor. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
This was an article that showed up in the Tampa Bay Business Journal is where I found it. I'm not sure you used the word epidemic. You've been saying crisis.
Yeah.
Fraud is a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about the white-collar crime crisis in Florida for some time now, and I think the reality is that fraud is a boom industry in Florida and has been for many years.
We'll get into the reasons why in a second, but you picture four types of fraud, right?
Yeah, I think there's four main areas, and when I talk about corruption or fraud or white-collar crime, I think there's four key areas in Florida. That's securities fraud, healthcare fraud, mortgage fraud, and public corruption.
Let's take on a couple of these things, because I want to talk. He was specifically talking about healthcare fraud and the Ponzi scheme type things. Let's talk about healthcare fraud. It makes a lot of sense. You got a lot of seniors moving to Florida because this is where they want to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Florida has one of the most significant Medicare and Medicaid beneficiary populations in the country. And any state that has a significant number of beneficiaries of a federally subsidized health care benefit program, you're going to have a large health care industry in that state. And when you have an industry that's based on the federal subsidies coming from these health care benefit programs, that's premised on the honor code, if you will,
right,
the fraudsters are going to try to take advantage of those hidden loopholes or those hidden opportunities and defraud the government.
How do they do it?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. I mean, the key is they just keep coming in and finding where those hidden opportunities are, and the government historically is just playing catch up, if you will. In any typical case, it could just be you're promising that you provided a certain service and you didn't, but the government's paying you in advance for that service, and they're finding out after the fact that you didn't provide it, or you didn't provide it in the means that you specified that you did, or you certified to the government that you did.
So the person who, the senior that becomes a victim of this is probably just not getting the service that was promised to them and that this person is billing the government for? Is that how that works?
Well, they probably got the service that was promised to them, and they're usually very happy with the service or the standard of care that they've received. It's just that the person providing the service is lying, cheating, and stealing. And this isn't everyone, of course.
Right.
A large majority of the healthcare providers are honorable and act with integrity. But there's fraudsters that get involved in the healthcare system, and I provide you a great service. You're very happy for it, but then I upcode it and I tell the government I provided you a greater service than I actually provided. Or I just make you up. It's a classic case of identity theft. I make up the beneficiaries and tell the government I gave a service to someone that doesn't even exist. Or I provide you a legitimate service and then I bill it to 2 or 3 different healthcare benefit programs.
And I've read about this, and we've talked about this. This is really a huge problem. I mean, they're getting a lot of money from the government.
Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, the healthcare industry is $1 trillion a year industry in the United States. The baby boomer population is just now coming of age and entering into the retirement system. And the federal government estimates that for every dollar they spend on healthcare fraud and abuse enforcement, they recoup over $7. So it's a revenue generating business as well. But the interesting thing is that the retiree population or the senior citizen population in Florida both gives into the healthcare fraud, but it also delves into the securities fraud as well.
And that's interesting, and that's where these people specifically become victims, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because in the healthcare fraud context, the real victim is the federal government, right, the federal healthcare beneficiary program, benefit programs, and the taxpayers who are subsidizing those programs. In the securities fraud cases, though, it's the people that are giving their money into these Ponzi schemes that are the victims because you're being cheated out of your money. Forbes magazine did a study just last year when they said that wealthy people are moving to Florida because they like the sunshine and lower taxes. And wealth attracts wealth. So when you have a large wealthy population, either because they're retirees and senior citizens or they're qualified investors, meaning they have $1 million in assets or more, you have both legitimate financial advisors marketing to those people, but you also have unscrupulous financial advisors or basic fraudsters. And that's what Bobby O'Neill is referring to. People are preying on that wealthy population.
Well, let's talk. I mean, we talk about Ponzi schemes, and Bernie Madoff comes to mind because, I mean, you were even saying someday they may rename Ponzi schemes Madoff schemes because he apparently pulled off the biggest ever.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of the mother of all Ponzi schemes. I mean, of course, Ponzi schemes are named after Charles Ponzi, or in the early 1900s created the Ponzi scheme. But fraudsters have been around since the beginning of time.
Right.
And even Charles Ponzi probably wasn't the first Ponzi scheme. But Bernie Madoff really took it to a whole new level, both because of the amount of assets that he was able to cheat people out of, for the length of time that he was involved in it. It's you know, probable that he was involved in this for over 40 to 50 years.
Wow.
And the quality of the investors. I mean, he cheated governments, foreign governments, and some pretty high-name individuals and investors.
Let's remind people. I know we've talked about it before, but it's sad and it's fascinating though how a Ponzi scheme operates, because eventually it catches up with you, but for a while you can live good.
Yeah, at its very core, I just presume that I'm a financial advisor and I solicit investments from you. And I never really invest that money. I just take your money and I go live a high lifestyle with it. Now, my ability to do that is premised upon me getting more money from additional investors. And out of that money, I'm going to provide you a certain amount of return to keep you happy, and I'm going to keep the rest of the money. So as long as I get new money coming in that I could pay my original investors and keep them happy, I can also cheat all those investors and live high on the hog. Eventually, it's a house of cards that all comes crumbling down when that pool of new money stops. And that's what happened with Bernie Madoff. It was the economic collapse of 2008. People started calling in their investments.
We're going to take a break. We've got to come back. I'm going to pick this up right there with LT Lafferty. Stay with me on that. Welcome back. Talking with LT Lafferty today about fraud in Florida that the U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Florida calls it an epidemic. LT at least says it's a crisis. And I had to rush us into a commercial, and I apologize for that. But we were talking about these Ponzi schemes, and we hear a lot about them right now because they tend to blow up and come unraveled during economic downturns, right?
That's right. If you notice, I said that fraud and public corruption has been a boom industry in Florida. The Daily Beast, an online blog, has recently ranked Florida as number 6 in the country on a per capita basis on corruption. And by corruption, they define it as all types of white-collar crime. And that's on a per capita basis based on arrests and convictions. The key is this is all the past tense. This isn't crime that's necessarily taking place now. It's fraud that's occurred over the last 10 or 20 years or 50 years, as in Bernie Madoff's case. It's that there's new law enforcement initiatives now to crack down on this fraud. The Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, Lenny Bauer, recently said that we're entering into a new era of white-collar crime enforcement, an era marked by increased resources, increased personnel, and increased funding and coordination of prosecution of white-collar crime. And we're seeing the benefits of that now.
And you say that's key. You got to prosecute. You've got to restore confidence in the public to invest again.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the bigger picture of all this is obviously criminals need to be prosecuted, they need to be punished, but it also provides a deterrent effect against other criminals. But one of the real keys from a white-collar context is that you got to restore the public's confidence in our financial markets. In order to have a full economic recovery, the public and the financial citizens need to believe that they can put their money back in that market. And they're not going to do that until they have confidence that the markets are secure. So the law enforcement effort is, one, to punish and deter, but also to help restore the financial integrity of our U.S. markets.
And you say punish and deter. Deterrence, I mean, you can prosecute and punish, but you'd always talk about the hidden opportunities. People are always finding ways to do it another way, aren't they?
That's absolutely right. I mean, fraudsters have been preying on these hidden opportunities since the beginning of time. If you want to have truly effective crime prevention, it takes more than just punishing and deterring other fraudsters. You got to crack down on those hidden opportunities, because those opportunities exist. These Ponzi schemes took place because they exploited weaknesses in our regulatory scheme that existed when those frauds took place. It's okay to prosecute those cases now, but if we really want to be effective in our crime prevention, we need to be proactive in identifying where are those hidden opportunities in the future. And the only way to do that is for law enforcement, the regulatory agencies, and the private sector, all stakeholders in the system, to get together and help identify those weaknesses and create those regulatory regimes that'll crack down on those hidden opportunities.
I know there are plenty of these cases to talk about, but the Madoff case is the one everybody knows about, and we always go back to it. You were telling me earlier, and I didn't. Well, first of all, I was surprised it had been going on as long as it had. But secondly, we still don't know how much money we're talking about, do we?
No, and we may never really know the full scope of that fraud because it's really hard to measure how much of the fraud, or even really to identify if someone was a victim, a true victim, or a willing victim, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So it's pretty difficult to come to a final number on that Madoff fraud.
I know that the attorney, U.S. attorney, was Robert O'Neill, has been talking about this. What do you expect to happen? Do you expect more crackdown to happen on all of this kind of crime?
I do. I think you're going to see greater enforcement efforts on all four of those areas, but more importantly, in the near future, I think you're going to see a greater crackdown on securities fraud. I would expect something pretty big from the Department of Justice and federal law enforcement to crack down on securities fraud, these Ponzi schemes, and to help restore the public's confidence in these markets.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah,
As always, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks today to LT Lafferty, and thanks to all of you for watching today.